Time for us to step into our very first conversation. Firstly, how are you doing? Before I even get into that, are you well? Are you happy? Are you healthy? I need to know these things. Find us on WhatsApp. Tell me all about it. +27832886684. Now, tonight we are joined by Caroline Webb, who is a sexual well-being coach as well as a therapist, also known step into our very first conversation. Firstly, how are you doing before I even get into that? Are you well? Are you happy? Are you healthy? I need to know these things. Find us on WhatsApp. Tell me all about it. +27 832 88 Now, tonight we are joined by Caroline Webb, who is a sexual well-being coach as well as a therapist, also known as an intimacy and relationship coach. Caroline works with individuals and couples navigating intimacy challenges, communication breakdowns, and sexual identity, desire, and trauma, and often unspoken realities of modern day relationships. Her approach is very direct, it's unorthodox, and deeply human, and she's about to bring that onto the fort. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to African Diaries.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Caroline, what drew you to this line of work? Let's start there.
Oh, that's a good question. I actually had it today. What brought me here is that I come from a very staunch Afrikaans Christian background and shamed for anything related to boys' sexual identity, whether I was a tomboy or not, and the fear, we were educated with fear, and I've always just been such a curious person about my own body, how other bodies work. And I thought there has to be another way for me to understand life better in this vessel that I am, dragging around with me and expressing my pleasure. And then the relationship side of it in terms of conflict is because I grew up in a very high conflict environment. A lot of domestic violence and abuse, lack of proper communication, and growing up as a child, it was the worst thing for me, the anxiety to grow up like that. So the best way to deal with it was to work through all of my own personal pain, traumas, and challenges, and then find a way of making the world a better place, even if it was only one person at a time. And so that's how I became the relationship therapist.
Caroline, what I find rather interesting about intimacy in 2026, because it is a new year, is the associations that we make at very tender ages. Right. And so let's address that for a second. For those who are thinking, where does my understanding, my relational aspect of intimacy come from? Let's drag it back to the foundations.
So it goes back to, so as humans, we tend to mimic what happens in our environments, or we run away from it. And our intimacy, let's say relationships that we build with ourselves and with people around us, it definitely comes from the ground up, how we were either nurtured or the lack of the nurturing that we received during our foundational phases. And when you've grown up, let's say, in an environment like I did, where you didn't really hear I love you, or you weren't really shown a lot of affection through touch, it becomes quite challenging when you grow up, when people bless you with the warmth of the touch, and especially if it's loving and caring, and you don't understand it. So we do tend to resist it or push it away when it's very foreign to us. And I think that applies to many variations of intimacy within our lives.
Caroline, let's talk about the relationship between emotional intimacy and physical intimacy, also known as sexual intimacy. I think for the most part, we have familiarized ourselves with this touch and go experience of each other. And it sometimes affects the one aspect of intimacy, right? Which is the ability to connect with people. I do think that there's a great link between the two, and how we go about navigating that will indirectly affect both aspects.
Right. Emotional intimacy, I think that's so much deeper than just physical. As you said, the touch and go of the physical, I think that's so much easier for us to express. And for us to achieve, where emotionally, I think it takes a lot of courage to make yourself vulnerable. I think that's where that comes in, the emotional vulnerability, and to talk about what it is that you want, and to be very clear about your emotional needs. The most important thing is that we have to feel safe in the space that we can express ourselves, and that we are supported either by our partner or the people around us that we express ourselves to, and that we can express without feeling overwhelmingly vulnerable or that we might be judged. So the real important thing here is that you set yourself up for success by building relationships with the right kind of people who are mature enough to understand what healthy respect and boundaries are, and that they understand their own emotions so that they can support you for you to be comfortable with yourself.
The voice there of sexual well-being coach and therapist, that is Caroline Webb, joining us this evening. For your questions, do find us on +278 3288 6684. We are still in conversation with Caroline Webb, who is helping us navigate the bedroom healthily so. She is a sexual well-being coach and therapist, also known as an intimacy and relationship coach. Caroline, I want us to get into the heart of the matter at hand. Now, in your practice, what are the most common intimacy challenges that couples are facing right now?
I'm going to refer to the sexual intimacy. And the challenges that people experience, or that comes up a lot, is that people are very misunderstood about their needs and how we feel safe to express ourselves. Many women resist the change because they feel vulnerable. And then on the flip side of it, you have men that want to start exploring almost. I'm seeing there's quite a spike in, let's say, people over the age of 40. They want to experiment because now the kids are out of the house and they want to take on something new. Women feeling vulnerable that they are inadequate to perform. And I say perform because, for so long you've done the same thing. And the way we navigate through that is just I say to people, let's start at the raw basics. Let's start together and let's explore together, so that we have that togetherness in our emotions, in our love, and within our vulnerability, to be able to navigate the sexual intimacy of our relationships, not just with each other, but also with ourselves.
Caroline, there is a growing conversation around quality over frequency when it comes to intimacy, sexual intimacy, that is. Why are we seeing this shift, and why is it very important?
So frequency, it's varied based on what your comfort level is. I do believe that if you are emotionally safe with someone, your frequency will be more than those who are not. And it all comes back to, really, can you feel safe and can you be yourself with your partner? If a woman is not supported, and I'm not talking about financially supported, I'm talking about having someone help her carry the load. If she's not supported in that manner, if the man does not show up in his masculine, we will withdraw. We cannot fully commit and relax our bodies to be able to give ourselves to you freely. And no man can expect a woman to show up for him if he cannot be the provider and the protector. So once you step up as a man in your masculine, I can guarantee you that we as women, or the women out there that you might find, are not as frequent as you want them to be. That will certainly change.
Caroline, with the ever evolving context of gender roles, right? We've seen this in society. We are shifting the tides, we're shifting conversation, we are almost redefining responsibility in the context of relationship. How do we then navigate that very statement around presenting yourself in the masculine and you as a female presenting yourself in the feminine if these roles are forever changing?
Yes. So this is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. I personally believe that the gender that you're born with, so whether it's male or female, you should not make a decision on going through any transition until you're well into, I'm going to say, your 30s from a maturity point of view. Because for men, the brain is still growing and developing. And for women, we haven't yet had the opportunity to, let's say, make a real solid decision about whether we want to bear children or not. And so the answer I'm giving you is not a medical answer. It is more, let's say, from a logical point of view, because I've seen it in my practice that you might have people go through an experimental phase and they want to identify, and I'm going to say as a pot plant, and I'm going, but how do you want to identify with that? But you want to sit here, you want to be emotional because someone hurt your feelings. I hope that I'm making myself clear. So for me, it is, you cannot take on a role of something that you are actually not. So if you're not a male or if you're not a female, you can't assume another gender or another, whatever label it is that you want to give yourself. And I have to be really careful in how I'm answering this, because I know a lot of people, because the world, it is so sensitive right now around the gender roles. I would rather just say that if you're a man, be a man and step up as a man. And if you're a woman, be the nurturer and allow yourself to be soft and vulnerable for us all to be able to fall back into the roles that we were born into and intended to be.
The voice there of Caroline Webb, who is a sexual well-being coach as well as therapist, joining us. And we are looking at the realities of physical intimacy and how we can bolster the experience of physical intimacy with your partner. Of course, this conversation altogether is a multi-layered conversation. And if you have questions, you're saying, Shayla, I would love to know X, Y, Z. Do find us on WhatsApp +27832886684. Caroline, we're going to take a quick breather. When we get back, we continue conversations. I want us to talk about your Love 360 relationship fundamentals sessions.
From Cape to Cairo, every beat tells a story. It's African Diaries on Channel Africa.
10 minutes before 11 p.m. Central Africa time. We are still in conversation with Caroline Webb, who joins us, and we are unpacking intimacy and sort of getting to the physical end and aspect thereof. Caroline, let's talk about your Love 360 relationship fundamentals sessions. This encourages people to be open about sexual conversations. And what are some of the first encounters that you'd have with people? Because I can only imagine it to be much more cringe in the context of therapy than it is with just your partner. And sometimes people don't want to talk about intimacy, physical intimacy, that is, altogether.
Right. When I decided to start the Love 360, I really based it on my first sexual experiences with a partner, because we didn't have a conversation. It was more about, do you think we want to do this thing, and let's do this thing. And before I know it, I blinked and it was gone. And it took me a long time to get to Love 360. So for me, the Love 360 fundamentals, they are about alignment. Are we sexually aligned? And the reason why I ask about the alignment is because we do evolve, we will be changing. What are your beliefs and your values around sex? What are your thoughts about it? How do you show up sexually? And if we do not have a certain kind of alignment, or our value system is slightly off, then the chances are we will forever have this problem, let's say, that will persist, opposed to if we are aligned and we want to explore together, and we're willing to love bond in that way, the chances are that we will be more everlasting than the average relationship, because of, let's call it, the love language that we speak with regards to Love 360. And how do we build on what it is that we want? Are we looking for vanilla sex with a little bit of a kink, or are we way out kinky with some hectic BDSM on top of that? So it's really all about how you want to show up and how you want to be treated, spoiled, or let's say be submissive within your sexual intimacy. And those conversations can be really tough within therapy sessions,
Yeah.
especially when people are not aligned.
I think, Caroline, altogether, us understanding that physical intimacy is more than the act is something to reckon with. I mean, you were talking about vanilla and BDSM, and my brain went, whoa. So there must be types of experience, almost to say that one has a sexual identity, so to speak. I want us to talk about how trauma affects your sexual identity. Because somebody may think that they like an experience X, but it's not necessarily them. It's more so a reflection of what they've gone through. And I think, just to add on to that question, how do we then heal from that to find our true selves?
Right. When I deal with people that's been through sexual trauma, you never want to take away what's happened to them. However, to the pain of the event. And the importance of that is you should never let any sexual traumatic event define who you are, or let's say you thinking about yourself as lesser of. So for example, if let's say I had a sexual experience where someone violated me, and now, for example, I might not like spooning because that's what someone did to me, let's say afterwards, and they forced it on me. So I reject spooning completely. I guide people and I will tell them, how can you change that into a positive? If you had the right person at the right time and they can protect you in terms of the spooning, let's say, form or a session after sexual intimacy, even if it wasn't really penetrative, that you can flick the switch in your brain and let them help you remove the trauma that you've experienced. It is all a process. It's not something that just happens overnight. You don't just automatically flick the switch. The most important thing is having to ask yourself, where does that experience sit in my body? Where do I feel the pain? And am I feeling shame? Am I feeling guilt? Or is it a blame thing? Am I still victimizing myself? Because then we need to dig deeper into that. Because as much as you are a physical victim of abuse, one needs to come through that and rise from it, because you don't want to feel oppressed by something that someone else had done to you, because it's not your fault. And that's a really, really big challenge for a lot of people, because they hold on to the pain because it's all they know. And you can come back from that. You can definitely become a much better version of yourself in terms of how you love yourself, and it's not your fault. And I think that's the big thing a lot of people need to understand. It's not your fault for what someone else had done to you, but it's how you respond to it and how you carry that with you that is your responsibility.
Caroline, a question from social media from Cess, in actual fact, just addressing exterior stimuli, things like vacations, setting a different kind of mood. How much does this affect the experience with your partner? Not just from a physical experience, but a mental one as well.
Right. I think that's very, very important. Your environment plays a big role. And for a woman, we sometimes often need a bit of a warm up. And men are very visual. And if we can marry the two in a setting, today the example that I used is, how about the two of us are sitting on the couch and we're either drinking a cup of tea or we're having a drink, and I just take my scarf and I gently wrap it around your neck and I start tugging on it and I'm playing with it and I start draping it over your skin. What are the senses that get stimulated from that? What is it that you feel? And then you start playing with that, dim the lights, put some nice candles on, some good music, good conversation. I tell you, amazing, intellectually stimulating conversation. It can just take you in so many directions. And the connection that you build with your partner, I think that's fantastic. If those things are aligned, your frequency will also increase in terms of how spontaneous you are when it comes to your engagement, not just necessarily having to be physical all the time.
Caroline, I'm going to squeeze one more question in, and this is from the crowd as well, to say toys, yes, no, maybe?
I say absolutely. We have to try everything once. And if you tried it once and you like it, keep doing it. And if you tried it once and you don't like it, maybe try a different kind of a toy. I do encourage it. And for the ladies out there, it is fantastic. And I want to tell the men who might feel a little bit insecure about a toy, it's not there to replace you. It's there to add to the pleasure along with you. So we're not taking anything away from you. We're just adding to the pleasure. Find a way of not seeing it as your competitor, but more a playmate.
Caroline, we'll cap it at that for now. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a beautiful evening and keep well.
As should you. The voice there of sexual well-being coach and therapist Caroline Webb. All things physical intimacy, and how this is not just about the act. It's about aligning. It's about healing. It's about being able to respond to your partner in honesty. It's about having conversations. Are you talking about intimacy with your partner? Are you learning each other? Are you healing from past pains and trauma together? And if you want to contribute to that conversation, you're saying, Shayla, listen, I have a statement or two. In actual fact, I have a testimony from what Caroline was saying. Please do find us on WhatsApp, +27 83 288 6684.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next, I set a priority and a due date to keep things on track. I create custom statuses to organize my progress exactly how I want it. I like to add the
Time for us to step into our very first conversation. Firstly, how are you doing? Before I even get into that, are you well? Are you happy? Are you healthy? I need to know these things. Find us on WhatsApp. Tell me all about it. +27 83 288 6684. Now, tonight we are joined by Caroline Webb, who is a sexual well-being coach as well as a therapist, also known as an intimacy and relationship coach. Caroline works with individuals and couples navigating intimacy challenges, communication breakdowns, and sexual identity, desire, and trauma, and often unspoken realities of modern day relationships. Her approach is very direct, it's unorthodox, and deeply human, and she's about to bring that onto the fort. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to African Diaries.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Caroline, what drew you to this line of work? Let's start there.
Oh, that's a good question. I actually had it today. What brought me here is that I come from a very staunch Afrikaans Christian background, and shamed for anything related to boys, sexual identity, whether I was a tomboy or not. And the fear, we were educated with fear. And I've always just been such a curious person about my own body, how other bodies work. And I thought there has to be another way for me to understand life better in this.
And setting the tone for the next conversation with Julianne Hoss, who is a systematic therapist and a coach with a master's degree in psychology from the University of Constance in Germany and a master's in human resource management from the London School of Economics. Julianne works with individuals and couples through both virtual and in-person therapy. And this is well known. She's actually well known for her therapeutic nature-based couple retreats. And that is what we are talking about this evening: healing, bonding, reconnecting, rejuvenating, resuscitating, whatever it is you need and that nature can offer. Julianne Hoss is going to teach us how we can meet these worlds through our relationships, romantic relationships, and of course, an exploration of nature. Julianne, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Julianne, we have had you a number of times. Yes, we have talked about a number of relationship contexts. We've talked about a number of emotional states, even, if you will. We've even talked about introverts and extroverts. But we haven't gotten into the thicket of your offering, which is this couples retreat offering that you bring forth. And I want to start off by gauging why it is you chose to go that way. Why couples retreats? Why nature? Why combine the two?
Yeah, good question. Actually, I've always loved working with couples because I think I've always just been so intrigued by how heavy it can get in a relationship, how much pain we go through or we endure, really in the name of love. It was something that has always fascinated me. And I once read a book that captured it quite nicely. It said that romance and loving relationship or love relationships, they really take us, but love also has the potential of carrying us through. So I've been fascinated by that, and I've been fascinated by nature, and bringing the two together for me was really an attempt to say, can we somehow find a way to connect with the world around us, with ourselves, and through that be more present with our partners again? And I tried it, and because it was so incredibly powerful, we kept on going, and we still do the retreats for couples in nature.
Julianne, nature is usually this place of solitude, right? People go into nature to reconnect with self. How do we make this a twofold experience? How do I move and shift my mindset from Shayla must find Shayla to Shayla must find Shayla and person X?
It's really through understanding that who we are is at the core always a dynamic of interacting with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us. You can think of a relationship to self, a relationship to your partner, and a relationship to the world around us. So healing isn't possible alone. One of my favorite authors always says that healing happens in community. That was Bell Hooks. And that's also kind of like a vision that we have with our retreats, that it's not just you coming together and focusing on the relationship, but through the retreat and through your relationship, you really focus on your own healing as well, because your relationship starts forming a platform for that. Just to give you some examples, for example, like a lot of times when we somehow upset or we're very anxious and we don't like who we are as individuals, this is something that we can discuss and work through as a couple. And then we see change also in how we see ourselves, not just how we relate to our loved ones.
Julian, what is it about nature that makes it very therapeutic and healing? I've always had the theory that there's more oxygen out there. Yeah? We can breathe better out there, but there has to be more to it than the oxygen.
So it's definitely, it has a calming effect on our nervous system. And there's a beautiful book which is called Love Amongst Equals. And that book also unpacks how we need to be able to center and soothe ourselves so that we can be really fully present and really understand and empathize with our partners and not just place our expectations on them. So that's the one part. It really calms our nervous system. That's what nature does. The second part is it also removes distractions, because we live a very busy life and we are often distracted from what matters most to us. And I always like to ask this question: if a child would watch how Shayla lives her week, and they wouldn't have any access to you telling them what you want to do or what's important to you, they would just watch you. And at the end of the week or month, we would ask them, what does Shayla really care about? And they would most probably, for all of us, not just you, say, well, actually about work and the phone and about being busy. And it really reveals how distracted we are from relationships, but also from ourselves. And that's where nature also helps to really center yourself again and also focus you on what really, really matters. And there is a fascinating research on being in awe and really being mesmerized by the beauty around it. Interestingly, we are mostly in awe when we see other people extending gestures of kindness, or when we are in nature and we see a lot of beauty out there. So it also puts us in like a mesmerized state of really marveling at the world. And through that, we can also reconnect with those emotions that also help us to marvel at our partner. There is actually a mindfulness based activity that I also do, where I let the partner sit opposite and then I cover the eyes of one partner and I let the other person look at them the way they looked at them when they just fell in love, when they had all of those beautiful emotions and hormones, and for the other partner to really take it in that someone is looking at you from that place of admiration and love. Tap into that energy. It's a beautiful activity.
Julian, let's see if we can get me into a relationship in the next 2 weeks so that I can experience that. It sounds so beautiful. It sounds so beautiful to be centered again, and not just you centering self, but someone to make you their prime focus. I think that is something very powerful. For some, nature is not as calming, Julian. For some, nature is scary because it's the creepy crawlies. It's the things that you cannot control around you happening without your permission that almost leaves you in this state of tense. I want to say tense fear. Sometimes it's not fear, it's just anxiety. For those who are saying that I haven't necessarily bonded with nature the way I should, what are some of the principles and the foundations that you would need to overturn so that they're able to connect and be in that state of calm?
Yeah, I mean, it's foundations that you also have to overturn for healing. It's precisely to transform control into a sense of inner strength to say, I can face whatever comes my way. Because control is more, I need to control it. I need to shape my environment. I need to manipulate it just for me to be calm and safe. So I need to have everything in order and everything in structure and everything in a schedule. And that is, it's more also sometimes it causes more upheaval inside us, even a neurotic state that we think we need to control everything. And giving that up allows us to really go out there and say, whatever comes my way, I will be able to work through it. I will be strong enough to find my way forward. And that is something that nature can actually teach us. And when you're anxious, it's not necessarily a bad sign, because anxiety is not a character flaw. It's often a sign of what we need to work through, what our next step of growth could be. And for a lot of those clients, it would then be releasing control and replacing it with self-trust, trusting yourself in the process.
The voice of Julianne Haas, who is a systematic therapist and coach, joining us this evening. And we are focusing on nature based couples retreats and how these can prove to be very fruitful for you and yours. Send through your questions. Find us on WhatsApp +27 83 288 6684. Julianne, when is the right time to go on these retreats? Is it when you're in crisis, when you've just met? You know, what is the context in which Mr. and I decide, listen, we're going to go on a couples retreat and we're going to go into nature and we're going to bond and grow?
As early as possible. And there's nothing that affects us couple counselors more than the realization that most couples come when it's already or close to too late. I love the retreats as more of a form of pre-marriage counseling or pre-deepening your relationship experience, because when you're in that state of really still seeing the absolute good and great in your partner, we are most open and attuned to understanding and empathizing with them, and that's what we need to build a strong platform. So I give you an example. A huge part of the work we do is of course around communication, and we're trying to unpack what does it mean when we get into our panic zone in communications, and why is that so destructive, and why does it lead to escalation, and to understand that your partner is not against you. They are just spiraling because maybe they are scared to be criticized, maybe they are scared to lose you. It takes them to those old painful childhood experiences, and understanding that can help you to see, okay, you are hurting at the moment. You're not primarily fighting, you are just hurting, and helping your partner out of that. And that is really important to understand. And the earlier in your relationship, the better. I would also recommend a retreat when you're going through a conflict, because it really gives you time to reconnect. It really gives you time to calm down. And through that opens a platform for solving your conflicts as well. So it can be done if you're in conflict, it can be done in a difficult time, but the best is really to use what you have available to build strong resources. Because also face it, love relationships as the core of how we structure our lives in society is relatively recent. We had this massive ambition that we want to marry and live together with the people we love the most. And now we have to fill that with life. We are amongst the first generations who are following or pursuing that dream, but we still need to learn how to actually make it happen. Somehow, marriages were way more stable when they were primarily economic agreements.
There we go, Julianne, right there with the bun, with the burn of it all. I love it when you get to that stage. Julianne, I want to talk about the experience in nature. I'm thinking to myself, and I say this because I often do go out and about into the wilderness. I'm trying to picture a context of what does it look like? What does intentional presence look like at your retreats? What is it that we're doing? You know, I've seen some of your pictures where you are seated on the ground and it looks like people are huddled up into groups. Walk us through the process.
Yeah, it really starts with consciously watching the sunrise, really being present as the sun rises, not talking, but just zoning in, grounding yourself, sitting on the ground again, being connected to nature, feeling that calming force. And then we do a lot of breath works and guided meditations. My favorite is where you actually imagine that you're going back to the moment when you felt most connected and deeply in love with your partner, and you're trying to get into that sensation, back into that feeling, so that you can carry that into your life moving forward. So this is what we do. We also then take like calm walks in nature, and I love this idea of also every time you take a walk, every time you just get yourself out there, find something new that you haven't seen, that you're curious about. That also really teaches you mindfulness, and then you can apply that in your relationship. Every time you spend time with your partner, explore something new, learn something about them that you weren't aware of yet, because that is one of the foundations that researchers such as Dr. Sue Johnson have also identified makes a lifelong relationship worthwhile, is that you keep on learning and understanding new things about your partner. So that's how we then use nature to really reflect on and grow our relationships in line with that. I also love just generally looking at the sky, like stargazing, or I love putting my clients into a meditation, let them really soothe into it and waking them up when the stars are out. We then wait until we see the first stars up, and then we go back to our main house, the farm. So we really try to integrate also the flow of the day and what nature is presenting to us in the experience.
Julianne, this sounds very breathtaking, right? It almost makes you feel like you're in this serene state of beauty, of awe. How do we follow up in terms of practice once said person X and Shayla leave the retreat, right? So we've gone, we've connected, we've healed. I feel loved, they feel loved. But now we get back into the city and it's the hustle and the
Yeah,
bustle and the noise. How do we follow
it's
up?
really hard. Like everyday life really puts us and our relationships to test. Like you can say that out loud. And a lot of people feel that they're actually running a logistics company or a daycare with the person that they were once passionately in love with. And it can really feel defeating. And I believe it's about setting conscious time just for the relationship, time where you and your partner meet and you reflect on the experience. So I give guiding questions that I encourage the couples to use at least every second week to talk through where are we at. Always start with something positive. What went well since we had the last conversation? What is really positive? And let's see if we can try to strengthen that. Often when we want to change something, we look at the gap or we look at what's not going well, and then we try to kind of eradicate or change it. But there's so much we can learn from the things that are going well, because we can realize it, see what is really good for us as a couple, and how do we strengthen it. Then in the chat, you can also address any challenges, any changes you want to commit to, but we learn how to do that in a non-violent way. And violence in communication doesn't always mean I come and slap you, but it means I talk in a way that really makes it hard for you to have your needs met. So we change that. So we learn non-violent communication. We learn to really express where we stand and what we need in a respectful and really understanding manner. And then I always encourage the couples, share also in those conversations what else is going on in your life. We always think if someone loves us, they need to be able to read our minds. That's not true. You need to tell your partner what is going on, what is heavy on your heart, what might be challenging for you, and through that for the relationship, until you have the other chat. And end on a high note again. Give each other a compliment. Tell what you love. Tell each other what you love about each other. So always start with something positive and end with something positive. And these chats can really keep the momentum going.
The voice there of systematic therapist and coach, that is Julianne Hoss, joining us this evening. We're addressing the idea of us attending a therapeutic nature-based couples retreat and the benefits thereof. If you have questions, find us on +27 83288 6684. When we get back, Julianne, I want us to address the context of parents, so couples that have children and that have responsibilities that extend outside work and work relationships, you know, the little ones that also require your attention, your affection. I want us to address that as a tail end.
Africa's heart beats one story at a time on African Diaries with Shayla.
18 before midnight in Central Africa time. We're still in conversation with Julianne Hoss, a systematic therapist and a coach, joining us, and we're looking at the plausibility of therapeutic nature-based couple retreats. Julianne Hoss, I ended off with a note there saying that there was a question that came in, or rather a statement even, by Adikax X, who said that it's really hard to try and be present with your partner when there are children involved. How do we navigate that terrain altogether?
It's really hard. I just want to say as a disclaimer, most couples that I work with that are really presenting problems of not being able to really focus or invest in the relationship because of the kids, as we do the work in therapy or at the retreats, they unpack that, they realize that, okay, actually, we didn't have the strongest of foundations even before. So oftentimes it also leads us to that realization that the children then became a catalyst of what was already challenging and not necessarily the reason. So I just want us to be mindful of that. But yeah, it is incredibly challenging because children are a 24/7 commitment and they want all of your energy. And it is really hard to then take a step back, especially in a time where a lot of people parent from a place of guilt and really think they need to self-sacrifice to raise those little humans. And I love the work by Gottman, and Gottman is a couple, like a psychological research couple focusing on relationship. And they always say the relationship is still incredibly important because children learn from you how to love a partner, how to dedicate time and attention to your partner, how to somehow always find a way to connect no matter how busy life is. So I think the first step is to say, can we free up some time where the kids are somehow safe or busy to tune to each other, because this is also how we role model love. Second step is to say, can we parent from a place of really enjoying our family and not from a place of feeling completely exhausted and defeated by self-sacrificing. And then I think really also being honest and learning to ask for help again. Can we somehow find a way to have support so that there is some carved out time that you have just with your partner again? But all that being said and done, it remains hard because I always explain to my clients, when you have kids, especially small kids, and that is still one of the risky times where a lot of couples get divorced, it is too much for one individual to handle. It's too much for two individuals to handle. And that's why we sometimes even do an exercise where I just ask them to say, you know what, since we met last time or in the last month, write down, what have you seen your partner trying? What have you seen them succeeding at? What have they kept going, even though everything was so incredibly demanding? Like, tune into affirmation again and build from there. And that's also how I structure my retreats. We always start with the positive. Tell your partner what you really love. Give each other compliments. I also like to have them write a short dating profile for their partner where they can really express their admiration and love, and then discuss what is going well, what are we good at, what are we trying for each other, because we are wired as people to always look at the gap, look at what's not going well or what we would want to change. So we have to make a conscious effort every day to look at the positives, to be grateful, to see what our partner is trying. And that can also change our perspective from someone who's dropping the ball or neglecting us to someone who's truly trying their best and our team player that we can rely on. That change is very, very, very important to make it through those testing years of having small children together.
Julianne, I would love for us to get into a part 2 where we address foundations, because you just said something and it literally pivoted through my being and I was gobsmacked for a few. And this was that usually couples that have a shaky time are the ones who haven't set strong foundations. And so I do hope that in our next conversation we can pick up from that. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a huge pleasure, and I hope to welcome you with your future partner at the retreat.
Absolutely. Next week, Tuesday, Julianne. Next week, Tuesday.
Yes, can't wait.
The voice there.
You can follow the link to sign up online.
I will do that this Saturday, because you know what? We are hopeful. That's how we're going to target this.
Yeah.
This Saturday is when we do it. And then next week, Tuesday, when he finally says, Shayla, can you be my person? Then I'll call you. I'm in it to win it. The voice there of systematic therapist and coach. That is Julianne Hoss joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for thinking of me.
Absolutely. 47 after 11 p.m. Central Africa time. Some music coming your way.
Every day, people juggle.
Conversation, and this one regards neuro-linguistic programming. Now, our next guest, Eileen Smith, is a transformational force in the space of emotional healing, personal development, and gender-based violence advocacy. Now, she is a qualified life coach and a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and the founder of the Emotional Baggage Depot, a powerful platform that creates safe spaces for dialogue, healing, and self-reflection. Thank you so much for joining us, Eileen. Welcome to African Diaries.
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you for asking. Let's get into the conversation now. For those who are new to your work, who are new to neuro-linguistic programming altogether, what is it and why is it such a powerful tool in emotional healing?
So NLP is more that's the short term. It's more grounding tools. It's just tools that you give people to ground themselves because we always anchored in trauma, unfortunately. And it's so much as touch. The best way to explain it is if you think of a memory, let's say if you smell chicken, this person might say, oh, this chicken smells good, but someone else, it might remind them of their mom. So it's digging into basically the things that we are linked to, what we have, how do I say, given meaning to things. We give meaning to things and we don't even understand the things we've given meaning to. So it's basically just unpacking, going to that and grounding ourselves and just trying to unpack basically that aspect of trauma.
Eileen, yes, please do finish your thought.
Sure. The one for trauma specifically, I would say that with the gender-based violence and deep trauma is your lifeline. You just go back, and a lot of people don't want to go back. But it's not as easy as it sounds, to be quite honest, to want to do it, because NLP requires you to really go in to dig deep.
Yeah. Eileen, I know that our brains gravitate towards negative, and I say negative with caution, sort of gravitate towards negative responses because this is a way of self-preservation. So if you know where not to go to, you're more likely to survive. Why is this the state of our being?
I don't think it's a state of our being. I think it's a state of understanding. A lot of people would rather hold on to pain than to healing. And the reason is because taking on healing takes accountability. So, accepting a certain level of pain and accepting a certain traumatic event takes a lot of courage. So it's more the fear of facing that pain.
Yeah.
And that's something, the only reason I actually went into this was to understand my own pain. I didn't only do NLP, I did access bars, I did Reiki, when I was desperate. I was just desperate to understand how this pain was consuming me so much. And one day I was driving and I said, you know what? I own it. It's mine. This pain is mine. I feel it. It's here. And now how do I start to deal with it?
Yeah.
Because it was dealing with me. I was becoming my pain. So I think it's more a lot of people won't understand that we go through pain. We are not pain. We go through loss, but the people we lose are not lost. They're still people. So it again goes down to the things we attach meaning to. When someone passes away, it's no longer, people don't identify them as the person, but they identify them as the person that's left. But we forget that they are still that person to us. So it's just the things we attach meaning to.
Eileen, rather, pardon there. I find it rather interesting that you speak about becoming versus owning, and I'm saying becoming versus owning because a lot of the thought process around dealing with trauma and pain is that if I own it, I become it. How do we reverse that understanding and help people gauge that owning an issue doesn't mean you become it. It means you are acknowledging it to change the context.
I feel versus I am.
Mm.
So I feel sad. I am not sad. I feel like I'm going through a depressive period. So a lot of people as well confuse depression with a period. You know, we go through depressive periods. It's human nature. It doesn't make us depressed people. So a lot of people attach I am sad, I am this, I am that. But no one acknowledges I feel. It's an emotion. Because
Mm.
feeling something is the ownership. Being it is just acknowledging that it's there, but not actually dealing with it.
Sure.
So I think that's the difference for me. You know, I can speak for myself, but that's how I have viewed it. And, you know, I don't speak from a place of watching people.
Mm.
I speak from a place of going through it myself. And I realized that the only way I could get to where I am today is because I had to go through it. And going through it was terrible. I mean, it's painful. It is really painful because you have to go, you know, when you go through a traumatic event, that started somewhere else in your life. So you
Mm.
have to go back to where it started and find out where you are when you're going through it. Because where you are is going to determine how you respond to it.
Mm.
So there's a lot of things that you have to unpack in the process of becoming or going through. And it's ugly. It's not a, you know, it's not a process where healing is ugly before it becomes beautiful. And that is
Mm.
the reality of it because you have to feel before you can actually deal with it. And a
Sure.
lot of people don't want to feel it.
Yeah. The voice there of neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, that is Eileen Smith, joining us this evening. And we are looking at the power of neuro-linguistic programming, but also her work in the space through the Emotional Baggage Depot. If you want to send through your questions, do find us on WhatsApp, +278 288 6684. Again, that number +278 288 6684. Eileen, let's talk about the Emotional Baggage Depot. That is a striking name. Yeah?
Yeah,
Very
that was
striking name.
it was actually quite funny. So when I, you know, after I did the course and I was qualified, accredited,
Mm.
I was dealing with a lot of women. You know, I would sit with them and we'd talk. And if I'm quite honest, I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't for another woman. She helped me through a lot of my processes. You know, she would encourage me to feel what I feel and deal with it, and
Mm.
literally just allow myself to feel it. So when I did the course, you know, I mean, we charge a lot of money.
Mm.
In my opinion, it's not for everyone, you know, and I just got to a point where I just thought that, you know, healing shouldn't be a privilege. You know, I don't feel that it should be gatekeeping. We shouldn't gatekeep healing. And that's where we started. You know, I got my friends together. It started very small, and I would do the emotional baggage depot, and I would give the women tools. So as
Mm.
opposed to me having a one-on-one, charging someone 750, 850 an hour, which, you know, it's quite a lot of money if you think about it, because you need a lot of sessions.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
just decided, let me give you the tools, and I would do it through storytelling and just examples. And, you know, for me, that was so important because in the group of women that would come, and we're talking women that have been abused, we're talking women that have gone through different journeys.
Mm.
The one thing that stood out the most is so many of them were fighting a younger self. And
Mm.
that for me was mainly my focus, was the younger self, allowing her to be free and literally just accepting that you do what you do when you know what you know, and back from there. So it's, you know, it's self-love, it's self-reflection, and it's truly learning to understand who
Yeah.
we look at in the mirror.
Mm.
So it was, you know, with COVID, a lot of things did slow down, and yeah, I
Mm.
have like 100 children, so I'm always looking after my kids. I'm joking, I don't, but yeah, it feels like 100. So it's just, you know, like
Yeah.
I focused, I lost so much time. I can't, let me not say, let me use the correct wording.
Mm.
I lost myself to time.
Yeah.
because I was going through so much that my children were robbed of me. You know,
Sure.
when you get to a place where loss is your comfort, you're afraid to love the ones that need the love the most. And when I got to a place of understanding and peace, I decided to give my children what they didn't have when they needed it.
Mm.
And I think that's where now I've been pouring myself into is my kids and raising them.
Sure. You spoke about having 100 kids, and I know that was a joke, but the reality is that we tend to go back to the place and the space and the age and the headspace that we were in when that trauma impacted us. I want to look at how this manifests on the daily. And the reason I want this to be brought into context is because sometimes we think we're healed because we don't talk about it. You know, we don't address it, we ignore it. And when the emotions come rushing in because familiar spaces that are recreated in our environment happen, we say, that's who I am. Right. And that's how we think we are owning what is happening to us. So I want us to go and just address how this unprocessed trauma shows up in our relationships, how it shows up in our daily decision making.
You know, I think I'm going to take it back, and I will take it back to, let's call it a 14-year-old girl. We'll take it into a cultural background. Okay.
Yeah.
14-year-old girl, strict household, goes out, let's call it, sneaks out of the house, gets raped. What does she do? She won't tell mom, she won't tell dad, because why? I wasn't meant to be out. When mom and dad find out, it's, why did you do that? Why were you there? How did you provoke? And that word provoke is a very powerful word. And I think it's a word that a lot of people carry into their adulthood with the people that go through trauma. I'm going to speak on the trauma side.
Yeah.
What does she carry through her life? Shame. And a lot of people make mistakes when they feel shame. If you look at many decisions that are made as adults, it's normally when we are feeling shame or we are actually vulnerable. And a lot of people confuse vulnerability and shame. So those two, it's, you know, bad decisions are often made in a bad state of mind. And we never go back and say, you know what? I forgive you. I forgive my parents on this day, you know, for not having my back. Or I forgive myself for not realizing that I was the victim because this person is not able to acknowledge that something bad was done to them. You know, then now she carries this into her adulthood and she starts attracting men that take advantage of her. Why? Because she hasn't been able to build those boundaries as a woman now. She hasn't been able to see that what was done to her then was something that is wrong. So now,
Yeah.
if you're not taught right and wrong from young, how are you now going to know the difference as an adult? How are you going to know when he hits you and he says, I'm sorry, I love you, but you have to forgive me? She'll forgive him and she'll keep going back because why? She doesn't know better.
Sure.
You know, but it's not 90% of the women that are abused, for instance, go back to their abusers. And that is a sad reality because why? They believe that they are small. It boils down to self-love.
Yeah.
And we carry so much of this, you know, even with girls and their dads or their moms. Separation anxiety starts from such a young age. You know, you might be having a meltdown and mom has to leave for work, and you would interpret that in your head that this is rejection. And then you grow up, and whenever someone wants to leave, you feel rejected. And you start manifesting this, you know. The biggest, the for me, I know that my biggest enemy is my mind.
Yeah.
And I've also realized that my mind creates a lot of things that don't exist. So I'm very careful with how I think. You know, that's where NLP came in very handy, by the way, is when a thought comes up. You know, I had terrible anxiety attacks to the point where I had to go to hospital. And if a thought comes up, I would sit and speak to my anxiety. And I would say, why are you here? What happened today? What triggered it? Is it from now? Is it an emotion? Is it real? Is it a thought? You know, and you have to now start having these conversations with yourself. Is it mine to hold on to? And when I realized that it wasn't mine to hold on to, I would literally, whenever the thought would come back to my mind, I would say to the thought, you are just a thought.
Mm.
You're not my reality.
Yeah.
And that is how I actually managed to get to a point of stillness, you know, to not have these constant thoughts, you know, that would just, because, you know, we don't realize how much we carry. And then we carry this relationship into the next relationship. And that's what the baggage depot was for a lot of people, was stop giving other people things to carry that doesn't belong to them. Because now it becomes a collective baggage for everybody to take on. Like, we just have to really learn how to unpack. And that is what really coaching is, you know, it's learning how to truly unpack.
Yeah. Eileen, for individuals who are listening to this conversation and they're saying, I want to unpack, I may be scared, I may be, even part of me is still resisting that I need this help. A part of me is still fighting the reality to say that this is what happens to me on the daily, the weekly, the monthly, sporadically. Where do they get a hold of you for your services?
I can send. Sure, do you mind? I don't know. Can we send them the email address when we're done with the call?
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. And
So
are you
I
on?
think,
Yeah.
sorry, I am on social media,
Yeah.
locked accounts, but again, they can just send me an email address and, you know, we can definitely have the conversation. I'm very happy to help. And I just want to go back to what that person just said. Yes, you want to, you know that you need to, that it all comes back to be kind to yourself first.
Sure.
Those things that you feel you need to unpack
Yeah.
might not even be as heavy as you've made them. You know that saying, misery loves company. Misery is your thoughts. It's the thoughts of the things that weigh us down. That's, you know, we literally allow these thoughts to weigh us down. And that's literally taking it and saying, listen, are you mine? Do I need to carry you with me? I don't want it. You know, take it, it's yours. And a lot of the stuff that's given to us doesn't even belong to us to hold on to.
Sure. The voice there of transformational force in the industry, in the space of emotional healing, personal development, and gender-based violence advocacy. She's a qualified life coach, a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, and the founder of the Emotional Baggage Depot, a powerful platform that creates safe spaces for dialogue, healing, and deep self-reflection. Eileen, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Welcome. You're most welcome. May God bless and keep you.
As with you.
Thank you.
It is 20 minutes before midnight in Central Africa time. If you have just joined us and you're saying, Shayla, I need Eileen's email address, we'll be getting that to you shortly. But for now, some music.
Here's what could happen if you don't have a will. 1. Your estate is distributed by South African law, not your wishes. 2. An outdated will could leave your partner or children with nothing. 3. Ugly family feuds could tear loved ones apart. 4.
If you've just joined us, thank you so much for choosing us over the rest. Channel Africa, where we bring you that African perspective. Let's get into our very first conversation. Today, our guest is Sibongile Ndashe, formidable feminist lawyer and the executive director of the Initiative of Strategic Litigation in Africa, a pan-African organization she founded in 2014 to transform how strategic litigation is used to advance justice on the continent. Today, we see that ISLA is shaping gender and sexuality jurisprudence within African human rights systems, nurturing a new generation of feminist litigators and supporting social movements to use the law strategically to hold states accountable, particularly in matters of gender-based violence. Today, she joins us from Kenya at a critical movement for the continent as governments make commitments from the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. And we're going to be speaking to exactly that. Sibongile, thank you so much for making time for us. Welcome to African Diaries.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've spent your career confronting the gap between law and lived reality. When it comes to GBV in Africa, how wide is the gap today?
We are struggling. I think there is a gap. We thought that at the very least what we hear in movements is that in Africa we've got good laws. The problem is implementation. And unfortunately now we are also regressing on the laws, which is consistent with what's happening globally. You know, the dismantling of accountability mechanism, weakening of all the systems that we knew and understood as crucial and capable of protecting democracy and our rights. So we are not doing well at this time.
I think what we have seen is that the African Union formally adopted the Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls in February 2025. Have we seen some level of impact with this adoption?
So this convention has not entered force. What usually happens is a convention needs to be signed and then ratified by member states. And when the requisite number of signatures and ratifications has been obtained, then that's when it enters force. This one has not received the minimum, which is 15 ratifications. And we are thankful that that has not happened.
Why are we thankful?
Because it's an awful convention. We have never seen anything like this in the history of treaties from the African Union.
Sure.
The African Union has been developing legal instruments since it was founded. You know, we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And now we have got this convention, which was initiated by President Cyril Ramaphosa when he was chairperson of the African Union. And when his term ended, then it was handed over to other governments. So the Congo was involved and Senegal. And there were conversations at the men's conferences on positive masculinities. But what happens afterwards is something that's a break with tradition of how treaties are usually developed. Normally, a treaty takes years to negotiate, you know, clarifying language, consulting with people, and all of that. The African Union adopted a resolution in 2023 saying to member states, you need to go and negotiate this treaty. The draft did not come until September of 2024. And what happened then, it's something that anyone who has written a law anywhere before has never actually witnessed. I mean, the only time I think when we can have anything close to that was when we had COVID, you know, when regulations needed to come out.
Yeah.
But here we are talking about a continental treaty on ending violence against women and girls. Can you believe that in mid-September, we had a draft sitting at 156 pages, which was decimated to about 98 pages about 2 weeks later. And then we have it at 48 pages sometime in October. And then in the beginning of December, that's when governments now start negotiating. This thing is dropped to 48 pages, 19 pages, 18 pages, 19, and it goes to draft, like 8 drafts. On the 22nd of December, they have what they call the final draft at 11 pages. So there is no consultation. What they refer to as consultation was surveys before the first draft came. You can imagine a continent as big as ours. If a draft is being radically changed, almost every other week, where would you get the time to actually consult, right, on this draft? So we have something that looks nothing like what you would expect of a human rights instrument, a treaty. Because the reason why we have treaties, is to set binding legal obligations for member states. So what we mean here is that a treaty is primarily a legal instrument. So we developed this treaty first to address specific human rights concerns by providing the substantive rights related to those concerns. So here is a treaty which is supposed to tell us that we have a right to be free from violence, whether it emanates from public or private sources. And then from there, it sets out clear state obligations related to those rights. If we are saying we have a right to be protected from tech-facilitated GBV, all of these things that we are seeing in relation to Grok, undressing women and all of that, then what we need to see in an instrument like that, it's that we are saying member states must regulate big tech, for instance, or prohibit these new forms, emerging forms of violence like cyber stalking, the impersonations, and all of these things that we are seeing happening with this technology that we have.
Yeah. Sibongile, I'm going to need you to hold that thought. We do need to take a quick breather. The Executive Director of Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa, Sibongile Ndashe.
Africa Speaks on African Diaries with Shayla Ndikumana.
We're still in conversation with Sibongile Ndashe, who is an executive director for the Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa. And we are looking at the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. Currently in Kenya, she is now addressing the realities of the treaty that moved from 156 pages to an 18-pager that doesn't seem to cover the full view of what the continent needs. Sibongile, I want to talk about this 18-pager for a second here. Does it address the full needs of the continent in context?
No, actually, it's now at 11 pages. So what was adopted in February of 2025 has been reduced to 11 pages. So what happens in human rights treaties, so some of the things, because there are people who are still supporting this treaty, sadly, it's that this treaty mentions cyberspace, right? Cyberspace is a zone, right? When we're talking about all of this kind of digital, like stuff and all of that. But when we talk about violence against women, we really have developed standards that talk about tech-facilitated gender-based violence and femicide. We're not just talking about cyberspace as a zone. We are saying that there are these emerging forms of violence that we need to be protected from. The problem with the convention is that it does not understand this. For them, cyberspace just appear haphazardly in this 11-page document as just a zone or as a space, but not as a new or emerging form of violence that requires critical legal attention where you need to set out state obligation. This continues to happen. For example, another thing that we have been talking about in the past few decades, it's something like femicide. Even when it comes to femicide, it doesn't set out, obligations to prevent femicide, because we understand the causes of femicide and the consequences. And over time, there have been people working to develop standards. So what happens in this kind of editing and development is that there were quite a lot of things that were lost, right, in this convention. So right now, what we are sitting with is a document that is actually quite shambolic, to use that word, because it does not use any of the frameworks that we understand, legally, that this is what you use to combat violence. So, for example, way back in 1992, there was an agreement, to call this gender-based violence because it is overwhelmingly gender-specific in that it targets women more than men. And that when you look at the things that are responsible, I usually make an example that it was important to define this gender-based violence because it was trying to surface that this violence happens because it is normalized, legitimized, and justified. So we continue to see when women are subjected to domestic violence that the question is asked, what did she do? We still young women getting killed, like 2 bodies lying on the streets in Pretoria towards the end of last year. And people immediately went and blamed them, that they were out there, drinking this man's money and refusing to put up at the end of the evening, something which was not even true. But you find that there are people who have got these ready-made defenses for this type of violence. These aren't things that happen ordinarily. If a man were to be killed, at a club, these ready-made answers that justifies this violence would not be there. And so part of it was to show that discrimination is the reason why this happens, because it's about autonomy over women's body. It's about women being treated as second-class citizens, so that when you are in a relationship or you are married, then there's something, that you actually owe the other party. So you can't come home late, or even if you come home late, then it is justified, that you can be beaten up. Something that's not justified for anyone else. Like people will not do that to their friends. People will not do that to their colleagues. But because this violence happens in the private sector, it happens to women generally, then that's why it was important to say we need to prevent this violence by recognizing that discrimination was at the heart of it.
Yeah.
This convention doesn't go anywhere near that, to foreground this on these frameworks that we understand. So, for example, years after this discrimination framework, or actually it was around the same time, there was something that we were given, as people who work in protection of human rights, something called due diligence. Due diligence in violence against women or gender-based violence, it's that the state can be held accountable, if it acts in such a way that perpetrators are not held, accountable. So these are all the frameworks that we know. So when you go to this convention and you look at Section 5, Article 5, that deals with state obligations. These state obligations, the way we know, the way we speak about state obligations are not there. What it does, it goes and gets like a subset of something, that looks like you recognize it, but it's actually something that would typically sit in a policy framework, or in a different duty. But you do not find what one expects to find in state obligations. State obligations, we know them, they are known globally. Is that they have the obligation to protect us from violence, to respect our rights, to fulfill, the rights that are there. But when it comes to violence, it's you protect. And when you protect, there's you have to investigate, prosecute, and punish. So that's what happens in protection in the criminal justice system. So that's how, as litigators, you expect to find rights in a legal instrument, because it makes it clear to member states that this is what you have to do in order to protect people from violence. It messes up definitions that we have had over time, like women's rights defenders. We understand the violence that women's human rights defenders are subjected to. They start by a definition that says a woman's right defender is a national, which means that people like me who cross borders and leave South Africa and I'm in Kenya, I don't have protection as a women's human rights defender when I'm in Kenya, because this convention says the rights belong to nations only. This is serious regression, right? But even when it comes to what are the state obligations, their understanding of women's human rights defenders are basically service providers, people who are working with governments, to implement GBV projects. But most of the time when we talk about violations of women's human rights defenders, these are the women who have been killed, right? As they were defending, women's human rights. We've seen this with women working in environmental justice. We have seen this with women working in different kind of industries. And this is it's conceptually weak, but it actually is a convention that doesn't know what it is doing. There are things, there are so many things. There are only 11 substantive sections, starting from Article 2, kind of ending at 14, 13. There isn't one provision here that is salvageable. And that's the thing that makes these things scary, because promoters of this convention say this convention talks about cyberspace. And the question is, what about cyberspace when you haven't set out state obligations to protect women in cyberspace? They say it mentions femicide. Yes, it does mention femicide, but it doesn't mention it in a way that femicide should be mentioned in a legal instrument, in that it has to set out state obligation and establish norms and standards for addressing these specific human rights concerns with regard to the state obligations, Yeah. And this, we ensure that these norms and standards that are created have the effect of respecting, protecting, promoting, and fulfilling the rights, that are protected in the framework. So it's a very scary thing, because most of the time when you talk to people who have looked at this convention, they say, yes, I've heard about it. And some organizations have already started pushing for ratification. When you sit down, with them, they said, I'm not a lawyer. I don't necessarily know how a legal instrument needs to be, in order to be effective. And so that's when you have to say, this is what a convention does. This is what a treaty should have. Even the structure of this document is insane. A treaty typically has got 3 sections. You have the preamble, you have the substantive articles where the rights are articulated, and then you've got the operational provisions. You go to Article 4, you find objectives. The objectives of the treaty should not be in the substantive articles. The objectives should be in the preamble. You go to Article 6, it speaks to guiding principles. Guiding principles should not be in the substantive part of the convention. It has to be in the preamble. So it looks like a bad first-year law school assignment. That's what we are dealing with.
Spongile, just to interject there, we are time pressed, unfortunately. I want to address the reality that we have different contexts across the 55 states, 56 arguably, across Africa. I mean, you think of countries that allow child marriage. You think of countries that have laws that stipulate that your body is no longer yours once you get into a marriage context. And so with those different definitions of the framework of law and constitution in the country, is it even plausible for Africa to come together and create such a document, such a treaty?
So I'm happy that you mentioned child marriage, because this is supposed to be an African instrument. So one of the things that you would expect is that it addresses the most prevalent forms, of violence. We've got early child marriage, we've got FGM. All of those things are not even mentioned in this convention.
Sure.
Right? And that is why our responsibility right now is to tell the African Union in Addis to recall this convention and actually adopt a resolution to recall this convention and revise it, because we cannot afford to have a legal instrument that looks like this, because legal instruments like treaties are not without consequences. They don't come every year, every decade, or every day. Globally, there are 2 regional violence against women treaties. The Americans in the Inter-American were the first to do that in that system, and then the Europeans were the second ones to do that. We are the third ones, and ours has to be the most progressive because it's actually responding to the context, that we are living in now. The others don't have the things, that have been developed as part of the response. And so we can't afford to have a treaty that can't even sit in a timeline, where you look at it and it's like, oh, maybe this was developed 20 years ago. It doesn't actually look like this because it is nonsensical.
Sure. Sibongile, I think we will cap it there for now. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and I can only hope that we'll see a better light ahead of us, yeah?
We hope so too, because this is scary.
Sure. The voice there of Sibongile Ndashe, Executive Director of the Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa, currently in Kenya attending the convention, the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. However, the context in which this treaty is being formed is so diverse in nature. Just looking at the various constitutions of various countries that allow child marriages, that have laws that speak to how a woman is not of ownership of her own body in the context of a marriage, I think is one to consider when thinking about this treaty coming together as a collective. Started off as 156 pages, is now at 11 pages and does not address the reality of the African continent as stated by Sibongile Ndashe. It is a few minutes before the top of the second hour. It is 42 minutes after 10 p.m. Central African time. Charlotte de Panda coming in with that one titled Eli Napa Vu. Before that, we had Thames with Replay. And then we kickstarted off with Burna Boy, trialed, or rather tested, approved, and trusted. It's me saying trialed. And the reason I'm saying trialed is because we're about to get into our very next conversation that looks at a competitive streak in relationships. Now, when love meets the ladder board, things get interesting. Some couples turn life into a tag team tournament, cheering each other on as they climb the ladder together. Others, well, they end up racing each other to the top, secretly keeping score on who is more successful, who is fitter, or who is funnier at dinner parties. Competition in relationships can be a spark, or it can be a slow burn. It can sharpen both partners, or it can scorch the connection that brought them together in the first place. When does rivalry make romance thrive is the question we're asking this evening. And when does it make it crumble? Joining us on the line is Paulo Mendes, who is a life and relationship coach. Paulo, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to African Diaries.
Oh, what a pleasure to be here with you, Shayla. Thank you. It's a great opportunity.
Lovely. Let's start off with just analyzing what kind of competition we are talking about when we are talking couples. Of course, they range in personal experience, but perhaps to bring it to the fore to someone who's saying, I don't even understand how we can become competitive within a relationship.
Well, it's very easy to get into that streak. That normally comes, remember, we're not only the fruit of our past, but our upbringing has great influence in who we are as adults or young adults or even seniors, right? In older age. So if you grew up in an environment where healthy competition is promoted, is stimulated by your parents, by your school, by your colleagues, by friends, then you're going to have that competitive streak in your blood, in your mindset, in how you see the world. Healthy competition is always a good thing. Push us to be better, push us to do things in an innovative way, to be curious, to be competitive. And that is healthy. Now, it's not healthy when we make our partner, our opposition, our enemy, our competitor in a negative way. And that comes in when couples disagree in a point of view, or disagree in different perspectives that they have about the same subject, and then they see the other as an enemy, as a competition on who is right, whose opinion is the valid one. And when we come to that point, that is not good, because then it's and And I bring in the word compromise. I don't think compromise is the right thing, because when we look at our partner as a competitor, are we assuming that I have to win and then you have to lose, or for you to win, I lose? And that becomes quickly a very toxic relationship. So we need to be attentive to whether we're being healthy or toxic in how we meet that need for competitiveness, for improvement.
You know, Paolo, something that you are highlighting there is the reality that we often compete with our partners and we don't even realize it. I mean, you gave us the context of your partner and you having an argument and you feeling the need to have your point being proven in that argument. And that in and of itself is a competition of kinds. And we don't even see that. You also spoke of compromise. And a lot of people feel like compromise takes away from who I am. Let's talk about what compromise means. What is compromising?
Well, thank you for bringing that point back, because as a relationship coach, I actually emphasize that point. I teach that to couples. You should never compromise, because compromise means somebody is losing. Somebody has to give up their perspective in favor of the other person. And I honestly don't believe, from my years of experience with couples, in my own relationship, in my marriage, we celebrated recently 25 years of marriage. We have 2 kids. And I learned one thing. It's not compromise that builds a relationship. Compromise means somebody's losing. It's finding a common point of agreement and building together. Let's put it this way. Think of the relationship as a triangle, not a pyramid scheme, a triangle. And you and your partner are at the base of that triangle. The more things you have in common, the more you grow towards building that healthier relationship. So you want to find commitments towards building a healthier relationship. I'm committed to work on myself for the good of our relationship. You are committed to work on yourself for the good of our relationship. Then we need to ask ourselves, are we trying to make sure I am right, or am I trying to be happy? My father taught me that. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? If you have to be right, means your partner is wrong. And that's never going to make both of you happy. Choose happiness, not who's right.
Paolo, what's interesting that you make mention of there is finding a balance between you and your partner. However, what if, and this is me playing devil's advocate, what if the only happiness I've ever known is when I'm right? That's the context I grew up in. I grew up in a space and in an environment where if Shayla is right, if Shayla wins, if Shayla is the one on top, that's when she's most happy. I want us to skin down the conversation to an individual, because in a couple are 2 individuals, like you rightfully put out, to say that you committed to working on yourself, as am I committed to working on myself, and therefore coming together it will be fruitful. But what if in this working, in this journey of self, all I've known is Shayla winning? How do we begin to have a conversation there?
That is such a great question. And I can bring that back to my own marriage. 12 years into our marriage, we were getting divorced. And if we narrow things down to bare minimum, or to the most primary issue in our relationship, was the need to be right. My wife was the only girl in a family with 4 boys, and she is the youngest in the family in her side. I'm the youngest in my family with 2 other couples, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And the only way I could be noted, or I would be validated, or I would be complimented or something, is if I was perfect, if I shouted louder, if I was making myself heard and seen. Otherwise, everybody else was getting the attention on me. My wife had the same problem. And so, in other words, what I'm saying is, and that's the same for men or women, it's the same for many people. Most relationships struggle with that because of the fact that if you're growing up, your only reason, or the only way you get validated, if it's when you're right. When you're wrong, you're criticized. if you made a mistake, you're punished and you're told you're not good enough, or you try 9 things and you miss one, you miss that important one and it's not good enough. For a lot of people, the reason they are like that, why the only way I'm winning is if I'm right, the only way I'm happy is if I'm winning, and if my opinion is the valid one, it's the fruit, it's the consequence of a traumatic upbringing where the only way the person found validation and sense of self-worth and self-image was when they were approved by being right, approved by being successful in what they were doing. So the person creates this paradigm, this belief system. And I joke with my clients, I say, you are full of the wrong BS. And BS is belief system. So the person develops a belief system that if I do everything right, if I am the right opinion at the right time, at the right moment, and I get everything done the right way, it becomes a performance-driven paradigm, a performance-driven belief system where my identity is attached to the fact that I am right. And to say to that person, you are wrong, you could just as well kill that person. Because admitting that I'm wrong means then I failed. And if I failed, I'm not good enough. If I'm not good enough, then I don't matter. You see, it's a series of wrong beliefs that are built into this belief system and creates the need for approval based on I am right, then I'm happy. I'm happy if you admit that my opinion is the right one. And that's not true. There is a belief system that is limiting the relationship. And it's a negative belief that's going to sabotage, it's going to create all kinds of things that's going to bring sabotage and destruction to the relationship.
What's really interesting, Paulo, is that as adults, we find ourselves consistently needing to work on who we are I suppose as an account of the things that have happened to us and we had no control over at the time, or perhaps not even control per se, but an understanding of what was happening to us at the time. And here's the context. We're in a relationship now. Okay, we discover that my partner, or let's make it Shayla. We discover that Shayla has this streak where she was in the wrong context, or perhaps a context that she grew up in did not foster her well to the extent where she now needs to be right all the time. And she's now left with this, if you will, flaw of kinds that she needs to work on. The two things that I want us to consider. One, she still wants to be in the relationship, but wants to have an opportunity to work on self. Two, she's not perfect. So this work is going to be strenuous for, let's say, her partner. How do we navigate that terrain to make sure that Shayla is growing, but not at the cost of her partner?
Well, I have that very situation with a couple that I worked with a few years back, right, where the husband was performance-driven. He grew up in an environment where he received a lot of criticism. He received a lot of pressure to do only the right thing, not to make mistakes. And let me say that I believe that our parents are doing the best they can with what they know. So I'm not blaming parents for any of this. But in that context, he grew up in an environment that was very critical, very demanding, and the only way that he was approved was if he didn't make any mistakes. Now, comes to an adult relationship in his own marriage, he has this need for performance, and when he's not validated in his performance by his partner, his wife, he is feeling rejected and he attacks back. The problem is you. You are not validating me. You're not recognizing my effort. You're not connecting with me. On the other hand, the wife grew up with parents that were very distant. She didn't know how to express love. She is eager to receive love, but her self-defense mechanism was, I push you away because if you're going to leave me, it's going to be on my own terms. I'm not going to sit around and wait for you to break my heart. So you see, at the end of the day, emotions are the invisible driving forces behind everything we do. Our emotions and our belief systems, they work hand in hand to create the blueprints for everything we do in our lives, in all the different areas of our lives. So that's why in relationship coaching, we divert primarily to the individual coaching, because the partner, the man, the other partner, the woman, the spouse, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, we need to assess each person separately and identify what were the blueprints, what were the experiences that created that belief system. And by identifying that belief system and correcting that wrong assumption, that wrong perception, the wrong belief, we can then allow the person to grow, or the person can allow himself, herself to grow with a correct, balanced perspective. Did I answer your question?
You did. You actually did. I think I'm going to simmer it down to the day-to-day practices as a way to close the conversation, Mr. Paulo. So we are trying to grow. We're trying to glow in this relationship. We're trying to be healthy people. I want to talk about daily practices, things that we can do now. What can Shayla do now to better understand that firstly her partner is human, they've got their own traumas. Yes, we're going to go to counseling, but counseling happens tomorrow, in the morning, after breakfast. What can Shayla do now in the context of perhaps a misunderstanding or a misalignment or just my thoughts towards my partner, so that I can ease myself out and understand that this is a work in progress? What are some of those ways of thinking and some of the habits that we need to practice in relationship?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of exercises, but before I do that, let me give you a foundational context. Every relationship has 4 stages. The first stage of the relationship is the initial attraction. That stage has actually very little to do with the other person. It actually has more to do with what I have in my mind based on my needs, on my desires, or my dreams, my fantasies, how I project on that person that person is going to meet what I need. That person is going to answer to that pain that I have, to that loneliness, or to that need for connection. So the initial phase of the relationship, the attraction phase, is actually not about who the other person is, but rather who I make that person to be. That leads us to the second phase of the relationship, which is when we actually get to know each other. Is that transition from the initial attraction to the getting to know the person better. And then you start to notice the little things that were nice quirks that we liked about the person. Now they start to irritate us. Where before we had a disagreement and we said, it's fine, but she's beautiful, or he's beautiful. He's so handsome. He has such a great future. He makes me happy. Now he irritates me. Why doesn't he change? Why doesn't he realize that is frustrating? So that comes then to the third part of the relationship. The third phase of relationship is where we have to choose. Am I willing to invest on, as I work on my own issues, because I realize I'm not perfect, am I willing to help that person in their own journey, giving them space, giving them grace, holding space for them to develop and grow, as I hold space for myself to develop and grow? If not, I'm not willing to put up with that. I realize that person is completely not what I wanted. The fantasy turned into a nightmare. I want out of this. Then the relationship breaks. If we make a commitment to work with each other towards building the relationship, then we move to phase 4, which is when you really start to love the person for who they are, as you learn to love yourself. Then the relationship really works at its best, because as I learn to love you for who you are, I learn to appreciate myself. As I learn to love myself for who I am, forgiving my own shortcomings, I learn to appreciate and love you for who you are, forgiving your shortcomings. So those are the 4 stages of a relationship. So to